believe it or not, everything we do is based on trauma. Like we go where we have a good experience or we sort of shy away from things that we don't like. We try to heal, but it's interesting because it's like layers of an onion. You'll peel back a little bit and then there's more. At those ages between 1 and 15, you are not emotionally developed, mature, or intelligent enough to process adult situations. And so in that time, what really happens is those images are being saved, but the problem is that most people are so removed from their own consciousness and their own like self-awareness that they're never able to pull those back up. And it typically takes something like what we did, like a deep dive to pull the files up. And then once they go away, your life starts to really change.
Okay, guys, got Jerome here today. First in-person podcast, and he's doing some very unique stuff. Thanks for hopping on, man.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we did a little, what would you call what we did?
That was a DNA activation.
Okay. We did that a few weeks ago, and it was over Zoom. And I was lying down in bed, eyes closed, and you were just activating dormant DNA for me, right?
Yeah. So in that process, what we're really doing is, if you think of like the body, like think of a human being as like a multidimensional like supercomputer, right? So if you think about computers where you have the hard drive or it's the DNA cellular memory. So that is where information is stored. Every experience that you ever have that you see with your eyes is saved. Your eyes are like biological cameras, and the DNA is the film. So every time that your heart beats, boom, boom, whatever you're looking at is being time-stamped, and those images are saved on the cells in that memory. And so anything that you experience in your childhood, that's where this childhood trauma, the images are light images, they're photons that are then captured. And then what's interesting is you have the image, but what's more important than the image is the emotion that you're feeling when you're experiencing it. And that's like the metadata of the image. And so all those images are saved. And so when we do DNA activation, we start with the shadow work, which is like the inner child healing stuff. And then that opens the gates for the higher things. What's happening is your DNA is like a transmitter and a receiver of consciousness. And so they're like antennas. And so you can think of like a radio station. When you're driving your car and you're flipping through the stations, when you get to the station that you like, it receives a transmission, right? So your DNA, once we activate and connect to these Stargates, your DNA receives these transmissions, which is the light language transmission that comes through. And we're activating Stargates and pulling light and sound through these gates, which then when they come in contact with the DNA activates. And that's when you start, seeing different images or different things that happen during the activation. There's 12 strands. We did the first 7. And when we activate them, each one is connected to a different gate and has different genetics and different abilities that are locked in that gate. So we start off by clearing them first. And then after that, we activate the dormant potential.
I felt really in tune lately. One of the things we cleared which I thought was interesting, was the sexual energy. So like people don't even know that when you do that with someone, their energy is still tied to you, huh?
Yeah. So what I think is really interesting and sort of crazy is that like all energy is sexual energy. And so when you have a partner, whether it's someone that you're in a long-time relationship or just someone that you've, been with, when you are having, that sexual relationship with them, you are putting your energy into them. So it's like you're giving a part of yourself every time that you're doing that. And then that energy is out there. And when we have, multiple partners, then you're putting your energy out into different things. A big thing that people don't realize too is it's not just physical. You could, like I said, these if you look at us like a supercomputer, you've got, other computers that a computer can communicate with, right, through a network, and that's like a human being. But a big issue is, pornography, right? So when people are looking at and they are, masturbating and things like that, you're putting your energy into like an AI hologram. So you're putting your sexual energy into this like AI matrix, and you're putting little parts of yourself out into a space that doesn't belong. So, I've had people when we're doing these activations where they see people other times, like, because when you're calling back the sexual energy, like you'll see the person who it is to call the energy back. But I've had experiences where when I'm doing it for people, they're like, I just see a bunch of like black, like figures like that are like empty space. And I'm like, those are all the holograms, because you're just putting your energy into an empty vessel that's being held out there. And so when we call back that sexual energy, we're calling back that life force, right? And all energy is sexual energy, like I said. So, it's not just the actual sexual acts. It's, acts of service, gifts, time spent, all your energy that you put out there when you're giving it to a person, it's being like collected by them. And so by calling that back, you're pulling back all of that creative energy that you put out into the field. And a lot of times people have put so much out there that they feel like they're run ragged. And when you collect that back, things really seem to change in your lives as far as like your energy goes.
Dang, that makes sense. Because when we did it, 3 figures showed up for me, but I've only had sex with one person, so I was a little confused. But the way you're describing it makes sense now. Maybe one of them was pornography or something.
Yeah, it could be pornography, and it could also be somebody that you've had a So what's interesting too is it could be pornography or even just like fantasy, right? So when you're like, if you're fantasizing about somebody and you're thinking about that during masturbation, you're still putting that energy into a hologram of that person. And so even if you haven't had sex with somebody, that's something that's where that would come from. It could also be somebody that you've had an intimate relationship with, because when we're talking about relationships, you have sex, love, and intimacy, but you can have those without the other. You can have intimacy and love without sex. You can have sex and intimacy, or you can have intimacy and love without sex. And so sometimes you can have and build a relationship where you're putting that type of sexual energy into that, but without the
physical act.
Exactly.
That makes sense. So what would intimacy be then?
So intimacy would be a connection, like when you're really close with somebody, like a best friend, where you confide in them with your deepest, darkest secrets. You know, it could be a loved one where you just have that like connection with somebody. An example is when we're doing DNA activation, right? So we're connecting through love. We open our hearts, we connect through that heart channel, right? When we're having those visions and stuff, it's because we're connected through the heart channel, which is our telepathic channel. And when you have these types of experiences with people, you build an intimate connection, because like something like a DNA activation, like you don't just do that with everybody that you come in contact with. So a lot of times you're having like a close encounter experience with somebody that you typically don't have, especially when childhood trauma and stuff comes up and you're able to talk through those things. That builds a level of intimacy. And so there's different forms of it and different degrees.
Right. After talking with thousands of people now, I'm fully convinced everyone has childhood trauma. Almost everyone I talk to.
So what's really interesting about the childhood trauma is that yes, we all have it in some way, shape, or form. Some people have less. I'm a spiritual teacher, but I've come in contact with lots of other ones too, and we try to do the shadow work. We try to heal, but it's interesting because it's like layers of an onion. You'll peel back a little bit, and then there's more. And it's interesting because the way the childhood trauma works is from the ages of 1 through 15, right? You have 1 through 7 is the childhood, and then 8 through 15 is your adolescence. And at those ages between 1 and 15, you are not emotionally developed, mature, or intelligent enough to process adult situations. And so in that time, if there are things going on, chaos at home, or things happening where there's like some sort of like sexual abuse or things that go on, what really happens is those images are being saved, but because the child isn't capable of processing those, it's like those image files get saved into like a zip file and put into like a hidden folder. That way, hopefully later they can be processed. But the problem is that most people are so removed from their own consciousness and their own like self-awareness.
The Tri-Light from Therasage is no joke. Medical grade red and near infrared light with 3 frequencies per light, deep healing, real results, and totally portable. It's legit. Photo biomodulation tech in a flexible on-body panel. This is the Tri-Light from Therasage, and it's next level red light therapy. It's got 118 high-powered polychromatic lights, each delivering 3 healing frequencies, red and near infrared, from 580 to 980 nanometers. It's sleek, portable, and honestly, I don't go anywhere without it.
That they're never able to pull those back up. And it typically takes something like what we did, like a deep dive to pull the files up. And when we're doing the activation, it's like we're able to pull those data files back up, because now that we're older, we can experience them from like a point of like non-judgment where we just are able to see it. And then when we experience it, the emotions come back up, we feel them, and we're able to process them, especially the process that we went through. We're able to use, energy frequency to process those out. And then once they go away, your life starts to really change, because believe it or not, everything we do is based on trauma. Like we go where we have a good experience, or we sort of shy away from things that we don't like. If you had a bad experience with a certain group of people or something that happened, you tend to not do that anymore because you didn't like that experience, right? And so I've found that when we do a lot of this inner child shadow work healing, that afterwards, the charge or the trigger that happens with people that once shied them away, it's not like they jump back in, but they're aware of, this is where that feeling was coming from, or this is why I don't engage a certain way. So you're able to sort of see it from a point of like non-judgment, like, oh, it helps you understand really what's been going on with you.
Absolutely. Some of my most significant growth is addressing childhood trauma and working through it.
I think that's a lot of people's most significant growth. And to be honest with you, that is the gateway to multidimensionality. So whether we were doing a DNA activation, I know we're talking about another experience of going up on a light ship to talk to ETs. Even with that, with the thing with the ETs, the first thing we do is the shadow work, because believe it or not, the childhood trauma are the chains that bind your consciousness into this third dimension. And so when that happens, that like shuts off our ability to be able to access these higher states of consciousness. And so I'll give you an example. You see children when they're very young, they're running around playing make-believe games, or they're talking to an imaginary friend, right?
Yeah.
Really, we're all just very psychic, and we're all multidimensional by nature. But through trauma and through indoctrination, that shuts off. The trauma shuts it off, and then being told that's not real or don't do that or whatever, and being shamed for it, that causes more trauma. And so that is what shuts that off in young children. And then if we're able to find, somebody that can, help us heal through this, or people do it on their own, they do it with plant medicine. Ayahuasca is a big thing that helps people heal a lot of trauma sometimes as well. That really helped me do some more of the shadow work that I didn't know that was there. I've done a lot of this energy work for a long time, but the eye can't see itself, or it's like, it's hard for you to do this work on yourself. And so that was a big thing for me that really helped with that shadow work. But it's all about the confrontation, about seeing it for what it is and being able to process it. Otherwise, you'll be stuck with that for, until you do. Most people never go through it.
Yeah, absolutely. Two things on that. So the first one, you mentioned imaginary friends. So what exactly is that, you think?
So those are typically like interdimensional beings. So a lot of so when we're talking about these different beings like angels or elemental beings or these different ETs, most of these beings are interdimensional. They're higher dimensional. So we're operating in right now we're experiencing the third dimension. When we open our eyes, what we see is in this physical dimension. These beings are operating non-physically. And so it's interesting because we are actually multidimensional by nature. We are actually operating in there's 15 dimensions, but we mostly experience 12 of them. The first 12 dimensions are they're connected to our physical body, and then to the morphogenetic chakras, which are outside of the energy field. And then there's three more. There's the light, sound, and time fields that like wrap everything and keep them all together. But so these beings are operating on a different octave. So you can think of like a music scale, where it's like, it goes up. They're up into a physical vessel. So they are energetic by nature. And when you develop your psychic abilities, the clairsenses, your ability to see, feel, hear, sense, and know with psychic senses, you're able to engage with those. And children typically have those on already when like you're born with it. It's a part of you. Everyone has a third eye. We all have chakras. We have this thing called a Merkaba, which is your energy field. It's an intrinsic part of our nature. We are designed for this multidimensional experiences. But through the trauma, it gets shut off, and we're restricted down to what we see out of our eyes most times. And believe it or not, people actually experience multidimensionality every time they fall asleep. When you go into the dream state, you're experiencing multidimensionality.
Yeah.
Right. So, and that's the best way to describe it. And that's actually the access point. How we enter into, these higher states of consciousness is being able to shift our brain waves. Most people only experience that when they fall asleep, right? When you fall asleep, you're going from alpha and beta down into theta and delta into REM sleep. And so that transition, that falling asleep, it's the lowering of the brain waves. And so when you can learn how to actively do those while you're awake, that is where all the psychic phenomena happens. And so part of all this tapping in and doing this stuff is being able to shift into basically a dream state while you're awake and holding that as long as you can without falling asleep. And that's how you access these psychic realms.
So similar to lucid dreaming.
Yeah, well, and so that's where this comes from. So when you're lucid dreaming, you are aware of and active in it. So it's like you're there, like you're like the player one in the dream. A lot of times when we experience dreams, it's like it's happening to us versus participating, right? And so the lucidity is when you gain more control, and that's one of the abilities of the DNA strand. And so that is where that comes from. But it's interesting because with the dreams, what I was saying it's multidimensional is that you know how you have dreams and sometimes it's some like wild off fantasy that's nothing like your reality, right? But then other times you have dreams where it's like similar to what's going on in your life, where it's like same people, certain things like that, but it's different, right? It's like not the same linear story that's happening. It's something similar but different. And so the difference is that your soul actually incarnates into a bunch of realities simultaneously. So right now you're experiencing this incarnate identity where we're incarnated, but your soul comes down through this like matrix where it comes down and it branches off. And into a bunch of incarnate identities, and there's also parallel realities. And so when you're dreaming and you're experiencing yourself in another form, that is you're experiencing another incarnate identity. So you're experiencing yourself as a different being. Sometimes it's at the incarnate level, sometimes it's a soul level, sometimes it could be the oversoul level. But you're experiencing a different version of yourself when you're seeing something different. When it's something similar where you're experiencing yourself as Sean, but it's like a different thing happening, that is like a parallel reality. reality, because when it comes to parallels and probabilities, nothing is set in stone. So things can change, and you can experience, if you were today were to go left instead of right, and then you go this way, your reality would shift and be different, right? And so there's probability fields based on your choices and the choices of everyone that you engage with.
That's so
right.
cool.
And so and they fractal off, and the one that you step into is the timeline that you make the choice, and now we're going this direction instead of that direction. So in the dream space, when you're experiencing something different, that is a probability or a parallel reality that you're experiencing through that state. And the purpose of that is just to integrate and learn experiences in a way that you wouldn't be able to, while you're awake.
Have you come across any dream hoppers? Because I had one in my dream the other night. I called her out, bro.
Yeah, so there are dream hoppers, and this is something that's actually in the spiritual space and this is where people that are sort of like have like the witchy vibes, where they're like people aren't supposed to be entering into your energy field. I've had people come into my dream space, and I'm very lucid. So when they come into the space, it's like your consciousness knows, like alarms go off, like something feels like it's not right. And for me, every time, this has only happened with a few people, by the way, but I've experienced them. And this is when it's not invited and it's not for your highest good, right? Because sometimes I've experienced where people have told me that I've shown up in their dreams and I'm training them, or I'm just showing them different stuff. And, and they're like, were you purposely doing that? I'm doing that? I said, no, but it's just sometimes, that's a common thing that people have told me. But when you're talking about the dream hop negative influences where you call somebody out, this several times, when the person came into my dream space, they had either snake eyes or reptile skin.
Damn.
And so when I saw them, I'm like, this isn't right.
Reptilian, right?
Right. And so right. And so like there was something really off about it, and I could tell because there was other people there and everyone else is normal, but this person had eyes or the reptile skin, and it was just like, this is wrong. And then there was like inner alarms going off in the dream space, and then they were like pushed and ejected from the dream. So I have experienced that, and that's something that is more common than you would think. And what I believe the purpose of that is when people have dreams and they're like, oh, they think it's a premonition, they have a dream about something, and so they act on that thing because it came to them in a dream, right? Well, think about this. If someone was trying to manipulate you and control you, and they're able to enter your dream space, right? So think about this, like say, and this happens commonly, I think, with like people that do like love spells, or if someone was doing a love spell on you, and then you start having dreams where this person is in your dream space, and you start having intimate experiences with this person that you're like, that are sexually charged or, romantically charged. And if you have dreams about that commonly, you might in your own consciousness think like, wow, I really like this person because I'm having dreams about them. But really those are being pushed into your dream space, and it's being manipulated for you to feel that way.
Wow.
You're having an experience, and then you start like, oh, I have feelings for this person now. I'm getting goosebumps talking about it. And then now you start pursuing that in a way that you wouldn't have. And so that's crazy. That's how that can happen.
I always wondered how love spells work, but the way you just explained it makes total sense to me.
Yeah.
Because that's your subconscious when you're dreaming, right? So you could program thoughts and ideas, and they wake up and start acting on it.
Exactly.
Holy crap. Yeah, when I called her out, though, she was shocked. Yeah, because I guess a lot of people don't do that. Mm-hmm. They'll just let it slide.
Like, if you experience that and you call them out and they're like, no, you're making that up, that could be like a weird conversation. But I think that, it should be called out or talked about. And that way people know, especially if more than one person is having that experience.
She went in my fiance the next night, and she called her out. She hasn't been back since, but yeah, it's scary, man. Happens. People gotta. Is there ways to, I guess, protect yourself more when you're dreaming?
Yeah, so there are things that you can do. There are things like invocations. An invocation is like a prayer, but when we pray, we're not saying, "Oh, please give me this." It's more like a command statement where you're programming your energy field with your voice. And so there are different things. Invocations work really well. And there are invocations, I could share one with you that you can use, that you do before bedtime, which protects your space and calls in guardians that will make sure there's integrity, so that type of thing can't happen. It's a good practice for things like that, especially when you've experienced some sort of negative experience like that. Yeah. I do this, every night now.
That one was weird. And then I had a bunch of reptilians just planning nightmares on me for a few weeks. And that was crazy. I had to get some psychics involved.
So the reptilians are interesting because, there are different versions of them. There are Christed reptilians that are, 12th dimensional, that are of the light, that are very helpful. I've had guides that have been like that, but I've also experienced them in a negative connotation. And because there are, I like to call them fallen angelics, right? Yeah. So they're just lower. They are there to manipulate, control, and sort of pull energy from you, etc. And they create distortions that keep you lower and limited. This tends to happen when people are in their spiritual evolution, right? They see you like leveling up and they try to stop you, right? Because the whole idea with it is we're all trapped here. We talk about like, oh, these beings are fallen. Well, we're here too. So, in a sense, we are that as well. And we actually, in our genetics, when we activate this DNA, we have different ET genetics in us that we have, and we do have reptilian genetics in us. I mean, think about it. You've got a reptilian brainstem. You've got a tailbone. When your skin burns, it flakes off like snake skin. Like we have that in our base genetics. We are hybrids of a bunch of different things, actually. And so they can connect to us through that DNA, but a lot of it is trying to keep us down, keep us limited so we can't evolve and ascend, because just like anything else, when you're being manipulated and controlled and then you become aware of it, now you're not under that control spell anymore, and they want to do anything they can to keep you under control. Right. And so that's something that happens, but I don't want to say that all reptilians are bad, because they're not.
Agreed.
And so that's just like saying that, when something in the media happens, this one thing happens, they're like, oh, all of police do this, or all of this, they're generalizing, and it's like, one bad apple ruins it for the bunch, but really it's not like that. It's the same thing with the Anunnaki. Everyone hears bad things about them, but a small group of them came and did some things, and then the rest of them get, this bad name, and that's like saying like, yeah, there's bad humans, but not all humans are bad, right? Yep. The majority of us aren't. And so, I try to not, I used to. When I first started, I'm like, oh, these ones are the bad ones. These are the good ones. But there are negative and positive ones on both sides of every race when it comes down to it.
Yeah, my bad. I should have clarified. Mine was a group of 180.
Yeah.
So it was just that specific group.
But this is a very common thing, and you're not alone in that. That's something that happens to a lot of people when they receive these, they're like psychic attacks, they're implanting, they're doing different things. And it's a lot of times to control, constrain, keep you in a lower state of consciousness. And they do it through fear, right?
Yeah. So let's talk about these implants, because you connected me with someone that has one in their arm. So what exactly is going on with these implants?
So that's different. So that is like a physical implant, and I'm not sure about those. The ones that I'm talking about are energetic. So the physical implants, there are physical ETs that will implant, and those are typically like tracking devices and things like that where you're monitoring. But the implants that I'm talking about are energetic. So your energetic field, you have, we have our physical body, but I don't know if you've ever seen a picture of it, but like your auric field and your energy bodies, your multidimensional anatomy, it comes out way far out of you, and it's like layers of an onion. And so what they'll do is they'll come into your different layers, it's the emotional body or the mental body, and they will implant it's like a device, just like a physical implant would be. It's like a little hook or something. And when they implant that in there, they do different things. They can be monitoring, they can be, scanning, they can be put there to like scramble your field. Anytime that you're trying to get away from it, something happens where you're triggered back into a loop. And this is why sometimes people can't get away from things. It's not always trauma. Sometimes there are constructs created. They're almost, you can think of like a thought form that is put into your field that then has a response, and there's something that triggers it. Every time you're about to do this, something happens and it like takes you off course, and it's meant to keep us from leveling up, and sometimes siphoning energy, and sometimes just monitoring.
Wow. How common are those? Because you've probably worked with a ton of people at this point.
So common. I mean,
really?
Most of everyone that is unconscious of it have them, because they're this like as a collective, we're being constantly, connected with and monitored by these different beings, whether we're aware of it or not.
Yeah, let's dive into some of these beings, because after our session, there's a next session where you take people up to these light ships, right? And is that all sorts of beings up there? How does that work?
Yeah, so originally how this whole light ship thing happened for me was I had a whole totally different life at a time, and that's a whole long story, but I started at first it seemed like weird dreams where I was having these dreams where these blue beings, and I didn't know that they were ETs at first, right? They looked like blue silhouettes of light that were like 7 to 9 feet tall and just like made of light. And so that wasn't scary. I didn't know it was an ET, but in these dreams, they would all just appear and they would put their hands on me, and then I'd hear like wub, 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 wub. And the next thing you know, I'd be like flying up this like tunnel of light into what I thought was a floating city. And so then up there, it was like that show, American Ninja Warrior Challenge, where it's like an obstacle course.
Yeah.
So like, it was in this like big open stadium, and there was like a series of platforms. And then they were like, okay, they connected their energy to me, and they're like, all right, we're going to show you how to float yourself up. So the first thing they did was show me how to like float in the space. And they're like, all right, now that you can move or you can float, move yourself across these platforms. So I did that, made it across, and they're like, all right, good job. And then that dream, or what I thought was a dream, would end. And then through, a couple months, every once in a while, this would happen where I would enter into the space again, and it was like a progression. So each time that I would go back into it, it was like right where the other one left off.
Yeah.
And so then the next time it was like back in this like stadium, and they were like, okay, now there's a cube, right? They'd manifest this cube, and then they would have me connect to it, and they're like, all right, you can float yourself up. Now float the cube up and move the cube across these platforms.
Wow.
And then so I did that, and then it was like, now move yourself and the cube across these platforms. I'm like, what strange dreams? Like what? Well, it's like this weird game with these blue beings. I didn't realize that they were. I call it training, but really it's entrainment. So by connecting to me, they were able to put codes into my light body that allow me to have these abilities. They transfer ability, literally like downloading a file. It's like a zip file I just put into you, and and now it functions. And so they were teaching me how to move my own consciousness, how to project it and move it, and then how to move the consciousness of something else. So it was like move you and something across this platform. That happened for a while, and then after several months, then it started happening. It wasn't like in the dream state while I was sleeping. Then I would be meditating, right? Just stillness, just breathing. And then boom, I'm up in this space again. But this time it was very clear that this was a light ship, and these were ETs, like they had features. And now I'm like, oh, okay. But there was something about it that made it feel like grooming in a way where they didn't reveal themselves to me as these beings until I felt safe, and I felt like that there was a connection where there was no fear, right? Because I only felt love. I only felt like all these positive things. And at that point, they told me that they were called the Arcturians, that they were a race of beings called the Arcturians, and that they were here to assist humanity, and that I was part of this program that they were rolling out, where they're going to be basically that I was going to be like a liaison or a bridge to them. And so in this process, when they were telling me this, when I say telling, they're not speaking like you or I am, they're speaking telepathically. And so for me, and this can happen different ways, but for me, what it was like was I would see images in my mind, and then somehow I would just know what they meant.
Yeah.
Right. And so sometimes it was like, have you ever watched a movie or something where you're fast forwarding, and it's like sort of like just skipping through, where you see something like really fast? It was like that. It was like a video file came in, and I would see like a whole thing like sped up real fast, but I knew the contents of it within seconds. So it was like, think of it like a word, or a picture's 1,000 words, while a movie's 1,000,000. So they're just like communicating with like high bandwidth, like high speed internet, compared to what we can communicate with words. And so it was like vast amounts of information, knowledge, and abilities that they were just like dumping these files into me. And so through that process, I was able to learn how to communicate with them telepathically. The ship itself is like a living field of consciousness. It's like a crystalline structure. Once again, this is interdimensional. It's not like a physical ship that we can like walk into, but your consciousness goes up in there. And this ship also has a consciousness to where when you connect to it, you can communicate to it. So it has functions, and you communicate with it telepathically as well. And so they were showing me how to use the technology for manifestation. The ship has a bunch of abilities, but the main function that they were having me use it for was, now they're like, all right, now you know how to communicate with us and the ship. And remember how we showed you how to pick yourself up in the block? Well, now you can do that with people. So now that same way, you're going to connect to a person, and then you bring them into an altered state, and then you can bring them up into here. That way they can have this direct communication with us. So what started happening was I would bring people up into the light ship, and then these beings are there. For me, it was first the Arcturians. And then after time, it started happening. I started coming in contact with a bunch of other races, Pleiadians, mantis beings. There are Andromedans, Syrians, Lyrans. There's all these different beings, and they all look different. And what's interesting is, remember how I said that they were first silhouettes of blue light, and then they had physical features?
Yeah.
The reason why that is because that sometimes it depends on the octave they're operating in. Some of them are a higher dimension than others. So some of them we will see as physical features, but another one of that same species might show up, and it's literally like a silhouette of light because it's made of light. It doesn't have like what we would see as features. And so it started off with the Arcturians, and then slowly over time, all these other ones were introduced. And then there's a whole plethora of beings. The space holds space for all these beings to come in. And it's interesting when you go up into there and you connect with them, if and when we go up there and I bring you up to the ship, when these beings show up and they connect to you, they start downloading this information into you. Sometimes if someone's new to consciousness, like a common thing, the first thing that they'll show you is like, this is what unconditional love is, because you don't know what love is. So like they'll show you things like that. But people that are more advanced, when you go up there, they're like, here's this new ability, where there are people that I brought up there that come back with new psychic abilities. Like we go up there for an hour and we come back and they can do a whole new thing that they've never done before. And it's just like this rapid transfer, and they connect to you. They'll tell you what they're doing, but then you'll see like some sort of like geometric image or symbol that comes out, and then like it'll come from their heart into yours. And it's like when it transfers, then all of a sudden, like it's not like you're being trained where it's like, here's how you do this. I mean, they'll show you how to do it, but it's not the type of thing where you have to like learn over a year on how to do a thing. It's like they put a thing into you, and then now you just know how to do it like instantly, like almost with like intuitively know how to operate this faculty of yourself, and it happens that fast. And so it's really cool. And like I asked these beings because I didn't understand, like, why me? Like, why, like, I'm just a guy. And I didn't understand until I started facilitating this for quite some time that I would bring people up into the light ship. And then after the experience, they would be like, when we were up there, you look like them. Like you don't look like you look like one of them. And then I was like, oh, they're seeing me as one of them, not as a human. And I didn't understand that for a long time, that like my soul type is like, well, they say I'm an Arcturian starseed, but it's like because of the genetics that I have of theirs, that is where my soul connects to. And so they were showing me that I'm one of them. And I'm like, that didn't make sense for the longest time. And I asked them, I'm like, why are you guys doing this? Like, why do you care about humans? Like, why do you want to help us? Why do you want us to evolve? And they sort of said that the dimensional bandwidth that they operate in, because they operate non-linearly, right? We operate in a linear structure. And if you looked at them in a linear structure, that they would be, so far in the future that it's like, we wouldn't understand it. And they said that they are who we will become. So basically, like in the future, we will be evolved like them. And so it's like they're coming back in time to help us make sure that we evolve to our potential because of the path that we're on.
So they're humans in the future.
Well, so so basically the potential of their evolution, we have that same potential, right? So sort of what they showed me is that originally that all these beings came from Lyra, which is like the first Stargate. And then if you took one of these Lyran beings and you bring it over to the Andromedan galaxy, that over time they'll evolve because the exposure to the suns and all the different things is different. So you'll evolve into something different. You bring that same being over to Earth, it turns into an Earthling. You bring it to Arcturus, it turns into an Arcturian because of the exposure, to it. That they've shown things that. If you took someone and you brought them to Mars and they were living in Mars over time because there's less gravity, there's less sunlight, they would get taller because there's less gravity. The skin would get lighter because there's less, sunlight. And so it's like an evolutionary thing where these beings, they originally come from a source and template, but they evolve in different ways based on their exposure and over time. And so they were just letting me know that we sort of come from them, or we're all sort of from the same family, right? They showed me that like that. Like how there are different types of trees. There's pine trees, maple trees, ash trees, all these different things, but they're all still trees, right? They're just a different variety of that. They were saying that we are no different, that they are just like us, that we're all from the same source, like the same God source that animates us, animates them. And they have this, this law of one where they believe that we are all, part of this same creation. That's why they're looking out for us, is because they want us to make that same potential that they have. We are sort of like a baby infant species compared to them. And, we have the potential to evolve that same way.
It's fascinating because when people think of aliens, they think of the 3D plane, they think of flying to different planets and finding them, but most of them probably aren't even operating like that.
Oh, there are some, but those ones are fallen just like we are. And so they are the lower dimensional beings. I mean, they're multidimensional. Some of them can go, through the same types of experiences, but the ones that we want to engage with that are going to be like helpful and beneficial to our expansion and growth are always the higher dimensional ones, because they don't have the same agendas as the other ones.
Do any Stargates still work? Because I know back in the day they were how they moved around, right?
Yeah. So the Stargates, so it's interesting. The way that the Stargates work is they're at a universal level, which are the larger ones, and then there are planetary ones, and then there are personal ones. So there are Q sites on the planet that there are special spots where the Stargates connect from the universal to the planetary. Right. And this is where we can think of, and there's a list of them. I don't have them on hand, but there are different places on the earth where these Q sites are. And we also have those in our body, right? So they're microcosmic, macrocosmic. And when we do the DNA activation, what's happening is we are connecting the cellular DNA with the incarnational memories and the epigenetic DNA. So there's a process that happens through the Stargates when we sync up the ones in our bodies with the ones on the planet, and then the universal gates, we're able to pull those frequencies through. And so they are active, and through these psychic abilities, we can tap into them. And this is how we can do these cool experiences. What was it like for you when you had that?
Yeah, so I got a
activation?
couple visuals, nothing too crazy. I wonder if I was on psilocybin, if it would have been different. Maybe microdose next time I do it.
That is a possibility. Typically, you don't need to have any type of plant medicine to have experiences, but there's a range of what happens for people during DNA activations. Some people, it's more physical, where they feel vibration in their body, they feel
Yeah.
different things, where they start like shaking, or they feel like heat, or different like kinesthetic responses or somatic responses in the body.
That happened to me. My right pointer finger was twitching, which has never happened to me. So I don't know what that was. But
Yeah, and so it's interesting because, like I said, these different things are in the DNA, and so when it activates, it happens in different parts of the body, wherever the memories are stored, or wherever the point that the energy is going into, you'll feel some sort of release or response, and it can be kinesthetic, and then there's a range. About 60% of the people that I do this with, it's a kinesthetic response where they feel energy in the body, they feel vibration. Sometimes they'll see like a light or a color, and that's on the low end. And then there are people that are more clairvoyant, where their psychic vision, they can visualize very well, is already on, and those people sometimes, it'll start off with like colors and geometries, but then as we go through, it'll turn into they're seeing like almost like a whole nother reality that's happening before their eyes, or they're seeing different beings, different like sometimes it'll be angels, or they'll see ETs, or they'll see different light ships, things like that. That's a very common thing that happens when the DNA activates.
Yeah, I was seeing color, so I was probably in that 60% range.
Yeah. If you're starting to see colors, geometries, or any types of beings coming in and out of the field, you're in that in the higher range. But some people, they just feel vibration, or they see a color. It's like, I see an orb or a triangle. And then there's other people where they're like seeing like, geometries and the images of beings, or being transported to another reality or space.
Right.
And the reason that's happening is when we're activating the incarnational memories. Remember how I was saying that we had like the body and the DNA is like a computer. So the genetic memory that we have in our body are all of the image files of what we've experienced or seen in this lifetime, right? But then so that's like the local drive of the computer, right? And that's what we're doing the shadow work, how those images come up, because we're tapping into the local drive of the computer. Now, when we're doing the DNA activation and we're activating the incarnational memories, right? So every time when we talk about incarnations, so every time that we are in this plane, your soul comes into a body, right? And then it's like you live this life, right? And when you die, the soul goes into a new body, right? And so when it goes into a new body, it's like the slate is wiped clean. Everything you experienced from the time before is like wiped, and you have a fresh start. That way you have a whole new way to experience. But those memories that were wiped are actually saved somewhere, and it's like they're up in the cloud, right? They're up and in the cloud. And when we activate the DNA, specifically in the different Stargates, when the information comes rushing back, the memories from that Stargate, right? Because we weren't always humans, right? So you've lived lives as these different beings as well. And as we activate the strands, when the memories come back, it's because you're receiving that download through the DNA as a transmitter and whatever. You are receiving that download, and then sometimes you'll experience that lifetime, right? For me, one of the biggest or ones that happened to me was I was meditating, and this thing happened where I saw myself like swimming underwater, and I was like, I looked at my hands, and I wasn't a human. I was like, this is an Atlantean time, but it wasn't like a buff reptile dude like Aquaman. It was like I was like a fish man. Like I had like flippers. Like I could see my hands were blue, and I had like webbed fingers. And in this vision or this memory, I saw myself like swimming, and I was like swimming underwater. And then there was an explosion down to my right, and I saw this big explosion. And as it was like a big crystal like pillar was like exploding. And as it exploded, I saw myself like swimming away, and intuitively, and this is just like an Aquaman, how they can swim faster.
Yeah.
So in this vision, I saw myself like dart off, and I was using telekinesis to bend the water around myself so I could swim faster. It's like you're using your energy to project the water. And so like I saw myself do that, and then I came out of this vision, and then I was like, oh yeah, telekinesis. And then I had this star decoration. It's called a Merkaba. It's like a star tetrahedron just like hanging from my fishing line in the room. And I was like, oh yeah, telekinesis. And then I like connected to it, and I just remembered, oh yeah, I can move objects. And then I'm like spinning the star with the energy. And so that memory that I experienced then activated in the DNA, and then that ability turned on where now I can use that in this reality. So that's how these incarnational memories, and this is epigenetics. So your environment and your experiences, it's like a switchboard. Your DNA like switches those parts of the DNA on to where they can now operate with this body.
That's so
and
cool.
so it's like we're getting downloads from other realities into this reality, so you can use those memories, those abilities now here to serve. And all this stuff is meant to be used to serve other people. It's not meant to when you've got psychic abilities, it's not meant to be used just for yourself, or for any type of selfish means. It's always meant to serve and enrich the lives of others. And that's where we get the greatest effects. For me, I can always do better and more for others than I can for myself when it comes to these abilities.
I love that. You also get the past life trauma too, though, right?
So yes, this is an interesting thing. When we do the shadow work and we start healing these parts of ourselves, as soon as you start healing, it's like the plate's full. Like you got a full plate and you can't fit more in there. As soon as you start eating, and it's like clearing the plate. As soon as you start clearing the plate, your conscience is like, oh, dump some more, right? And so you'll start taking on trauma from other incarnations and lifetimes. And this is where people, they start having fears of things. And we're like, so I'll give you the best example. People that are afraid of getting eaten by sharks, but have never been by the ocean, or like afraid of spiders or snakes or things like that. Typically, that fear, where that comes from, is in a past life, you died from being eaten by a shark, or you died from being bitten by a spider. And so that fear and that memory then is like, you remember that, and it's so deep rooted from that. And so those are the different traumas that will show up through the
interesting
memories. And so, but yeah, you'll start taking on traumas. That's just an example that people would understand to relate it to, but all sorts of different emotional traumas or different things can start coming through. And it's like, where is this coming from? Why do I feel this type of thing? Like life has been good. Why do I feel depressed out of nowhere? Why do I feel like there's this thing happening? And it's because you start taking on other emotional traumas from those lives. That way you can clear and heal them. When you tell the universe that you're on this healing journey and this ascension journey and you're doing this work, once you start doing it, you're telling it that you can handle that, right? And so you start clearing some of it, and then you start getting dumped on with more, because it's your job and mission now to be able to clear that out. And that way you can heal and evolve more.
Right. Because there's a lot of past lives, a lot of trauma. Yeah. Hundreds for most people, right? Hundreds of lives.
So much more than that.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, so it breaks down. You've got like at the top of source, you got a rishi that breaks down into 12 avatars, and then those 12 avatars break into 12 oversouls. Those 12 oversouls break into 12 souls.
Damn.
Then each of those souls break into 12 incarnate identities. So I think it's like, as you go down, it goes from like 1 into like 1728, then into like thousands.
Holy
because the incarnate identities, you have the incarnate and you also have the parallel. So it's like all these probabilities. So there's so many that there are that you can go through. And a lot of people, when they do a lot of this past life healing, they go through like 1 or 2 and think like, oh, I healed all my past life trauma. But there's what seems like infinite.
It's insane. So you really can't fully heal that, huh?
Yeah. And as we go through, we do as much as we can, right? And people that are actively putting the work will heal more, but it's definitely a lifelong process. I've been doing this for several years now, and I feel like I've cleared out a lot of it, but I know that there's so many things that they come up all the time, and I'm constantly getting lessons and constantly learning new things and trauma triggers, and the universe will give you those experiences. That way you can learn the lessons. If you don't learn it, it's just like you're stuck in a loop, right? And so you'll be prompted with these things constantly, and it's interesting because it's also very humbling, especially when you're a spiritual teacher and someone that does this, professionally, when you're doing this, to realize that you still have things within yourself that need to heal. And it's interesting too, that when you're helping somebody heal through another thing, it's hard to help someone heal or process through a thing that you haven't experienced yourself. Right? There's a big thing going on in spirituality where there's these spiritual healers that they have only intellectualized an experience, not like lived and made it through it. And when it comes to like, using your energy to heal other people, like you hold a frequency. And if that isn't in your aura, it's not in your frequency, like it's not scary where you can help somebody heal it because you're not healed of that yourself. And this is a thing that where and when you come in contact with certain people, their energy, when they connect to you and like you're feeling things happen, and there's always different things, you can tell the authenticity in people when they've done the work compared to when they haven't. And I advise people to stay away from the intellectual things where people learned about it in a course but haven't been through it in their life, where they're just regurgitating a thing that they haven't experienced themselves.
That's great advice. And that goes beyond healing. That's just in general.
In general in life, yeah, because there's a lot of people out there that, and don't get me wrong, the information can be great that they're regurgitating, etc. But it's about the embodiment of the practice and of the experiences.
Absolutely. Now, a lot of people watching this are going to think we're crazy, but you actually were hooked up to an EEG brain scan while you were performing one of these sessions, right?
Yeah, and people can see this. So I was on the show UFO Witness on Discovery Plus. It's season 2, episode it's either 7 or 8. It's called Black Triangles. But on that show, Ben Hansen and Melissa Till are the two interviewers. And Melissa is an investigative journalist, and Ben, he's ex FBI Homeland Security interrogator. So he's the guy that interrogates the bad guys to see through, to cut through the BS.
Yeah.
And so she was like, I know I was brought to her by a friend that she knew and trusted, and she's like, I believe in this fully, but like, Ben doesn't. And so when I met him, he's like, hey, like basically on the show, what they do is people have an experience and he tries to debunk it through using some sort of thing. There was another girl that had an experience. They hooked her up to 3 different type of lie detectors.
Yeah.
She's telling her story to see if it's, false. And he was like, well, for you, because I told him I bring people up in the light ships. He was like, I'm not going up into a was like, what? And he's like, no. He's like, what we're going to do is, he's like, I want to ask you questions while you, because it's multidimensional. I'm sitting here in this chair, but you can bilocate, you can take a portion of your consciousness. And it's like, remember talking about computers.
Yeah.
It's like the browser screen, how you can have multiple windows open.
Tabs, yeah.
Right. So it's like I can put a portion of my consciousness into this other tab to where I'm perceiving something else while I'm still also here. And so at the time, I never did this before. I was used to bringing people up and then they see the experience. He's like, I'm not going up and I think you're full of it. So here's how we're going to do this test. He's like, I'm going to hook you up to an EEG brainwave monitoring device. So I'm going to see what your brainwaves are doing while we do this test. So he's like, how I'm going to do this is I'm going to get a baseline, right? So with this baseline, I'm going to hook you up and then I'm going to ask you a bunch of questions to see what your brain does when you think of answers, right? So I'm going to get a readout and see this pattern. And then we're going to go up into your light ship where these beings are, and then I'm going to ask you questions to ask them, and then we're going to see what your brain does in that portion. He's like, and if they're the same, you're full of it, because if it's the same brainwaves, it's like you're literally just making up an answer, or you're fabricating a thing. He's like, so let's see. And so, the first time when we did it, when he's asking the questions and I'm thinking of answers, my brain waves were in 80 and 90 hertz, which is like the alpha beta range, which is likely what we're in right now when you're having a focused conversation. And then when he's like, okay, now go up into the light ship. So I just narrate what I'm doing as I'm doing it, as I'm visualizing the things and breathing. They also have me hooked up to a pulse oximeter, which is like takes your blood pressure and your heart rate and oxygen, I believe is what that was. So I'm just telling them, okay, I'm going through this portal opens and I see myself go up this beam of light. And when I'm narrating what's happening, the thing on my finger starts beeping because something with the heart rate change is like sort of like looks like that's interesting. And then so that happened first. Then when I'm up in this space, when I'm up there's a bunch of different rooms, there's a bunch of different technologies. But the one that we were entering into is sort of like it's like looking glass technology. You go in this room and there's these beings, and then there's this big holographic screen. If you've ever seen the movie Iron Man, where he's got Jarvis and he's like,
yeah.
It's like that, where it's like a see-through screen. And this is why it reminds me of like a computer monitor, or a like a movie theater screen. And then they're there, and then I connect to them, and then I ask them questions, and they just show me the answers up on the screen, right? And so I told them, okay, I'm in the space now. I'm connected to them, and so they started asking questions. Like the first one was the black triangles that we're seeing over Vegas. Are those the Arcturians, the beings that I'm connecting with? And when they asked that question, what they showed me up on the screen was a naval carrier ship with fighter pilots taking off the ship. So I'm like, no, that's military. That's not these beings. Yeah. And he just asked me all these different questions, and I'm just telling him what I'm seeing, right? I'm just seeing different images. And then when that was all said and done, when I come back, he's like looking at the screen. He's like, all right, that's enough questions. He's looking at the screen. He's like, yeah. So the whole time when we're doing this, the brainwaves were completely different. He's like, when we first started, you were in alpha and beta. And then when we were up in the light ship, your brainwaves dropped from 80, 90 hertz to 30 hertz. And the whole time you were in 30 hertz. And 30 hertz, that's when you're in theta, right? So theta is like the dream state. So we're able to achieve these things by actively shifting our brainwaves into like a dream state while awake. And he's like, something's happening here. Like something's happening, and it's completely abnormal for that to happen. And so that was sort of, how he proved it. And what's actually crazy about that show, though, and it's fun to talk about this here now, is that it's Hollywood and it's a show, and they have an agenda. They interviewed other people on the same episode as me about these beings, and they're like, oh yeah, the black triangles that we're seeing are from here. They asked me a bunch of questions before the interview, where they had a bunch of like dialogue of me talking. Then when the show actually aired, when he asked me, are the black triangles that we're seeing over Vegas the Arcturians, I clearly, when we were there, said no, this, that, and the other, but they edited it to where they said, are the black triangles Arcturians? And then in the video, you see me say yes. this like that is I was like, I was like they completely changed
Right.
the spirit of what I said because the other people said that they were, so they wanted to line everybody up. But I'm like, but I felt okay with it though because at the end of the day, it still showed that what I was doing was in integrity. And of course, even though they changed, like if you watch the episode, you'll hear me say yes that they were, but it wasn't. But at least they didn't make me look like what I was doing was false. I mean, they obviously showed what was happening was a real phenomenon. So I was like, I'm okay with that.
That's cool, man.
But it's Hollywood.
Yeah, no, that's super cool because there's not a lot of studies like that on stuff like this.
There should be more and more. And so there's something else that I want to do in the future. I've already done it, but like to document it. Have you ever seen those like sometimes see them at psychic shops where it's like aura imaging where you put your hand on a thing and it shows you like your energy?
Yes, I did one and it was a scam. I did it in Sedona.
Really?
My fiance and I, same exact results.
And it really?
Yeah, I was really, really upset.
So I'm not sure who that was or which one you were using, but there are aura scanning devices where when you typically the ones you see, you put your hand on it and it'll take a picture. It'll show your auric field. But they have ones where you can have the setting where it's like it's just on. So you can put your hand on it and then it shows your auric field the whole time, right? And you can record it. And so I did this with somebody where I did it with DNA activation, and I also did it when they're up in the light ship. And so the whole time you can see the aura scan while the person just has their hand on it while I'm bringing them through this experience.
Wow.
And when I bring them up in the light ship, like when we shift from our consciousness here to there, the whole aura is like going crazy. Like it's like changing colors and swirling and moving around. And then when the beings are there and they're connecting, you can literally, as I'm saying the thing that I'm seeing that's happening, like they're doing this and you see the whole aura thing shifting and changing during these different things. The same thing with the DNA activation. When speaking the light language, you see the whole thing like moving, changing colors, all these different things are being rearranged. And so that's another way that it's detecting it through Kirlian photography, because that's what that is. Those aura scans, they're sensing the light emission coming off our bodies. It's the biophotons coming from the fingertips. And so those machines can be and are very accurate. I know there are scientists that use them for things. I'm not sure the one that you did, but it should never be.
It was a touristy gimmick. I'd love to do a real one. That'd be cool.
Yeah.
Because I want to know what my field is.
It's called Kirlian photography, and it'll change. So your field now might be different from a week from now. It might be different.
Oh, it changes that much.
It changes because the colors represent the chakras that are more open or not. And so it can change based on how you're feeling, your mood, different things you're going through in your spiritual development.
Got it.
So they can be different. But yeah, if two people do them, they should not be identical.
Yeah. No, it was completely identical.
I mean, sometimes partners sync up to where they can be, something similar.
Yeah.
For it to be like, in those readings, there should have been like a color photo image, and then there should have also been a bunch of other readings that were like points of information that say a thing about you. And if it was all identical, that makes me think they just printed it out twice.
Yeah, no, they did that. I already left a 1-star review. So if people want to like learn from you or do in-person events, do you have those going on too?
Yeah. So on my social media, and on my website's jeromemartin3.com, and my social media is jeromemartin3 also. And in my link in bio, there's events. They can go on my website. I'm doing weekly live events for DNA activation and also for applied metaphysics training. So besides doing these one-off things, I also train people in metaphysical science. And what that means is I teach people how to, from like beginning to end, train their light body, right? We start with DNA activation, then we train the light body and develop the senses to where, I've got people that now facilitate these same things. I've got 10 people that are bringing other people up into these light ships or doing DNA activations. And so I was doing everything one-on-one where it's like, we do this over a long period of time, but I'm now doing them in groups, right? The DNA activations can be done in groups and the training can be done in groups. It's just less personal. When we do it one-on-one, it's like hand holding where it's like, you can think of me as like a metaphysical personal trainer. If you had fitness goals you weren't achieving and you hired a trainer, that trainer would show you the technique. They would sit there and make you do it to hold you accountable. They might change your diet with supplements, etc. We do that for conductivity and a couple of things. And then they also are making sure that you're doing this. And so we do it together. So it entrains, because my frequency has it. When we do it together, it's easily transferable. Then you practice on your own and it grows, right? And your consciousness is very much like a muscle, right? The more that you exercise it, the stronger it gets. The problem is most of humanity it's atrophied. Most people have never used their light body. They're only using their physical body.
Yeah.
And so at first, it starts off as, it's like a stair step where each week or each time we meet, there's another progression. So in the group events with that, it's going to be that same training. It's just not one-on-one. So it's like a group event where teach all about it, have an experience, guided experience, and then Q&A. And then if you're not getting it, then you can come do one-on-one and we'll do it together.
I love it.
But yeah, so there's group events on the website and on social
I think the light language stuff is the next big thing, dude. Have you looked into Infoceuticals yet?
I have not looked at Infoceuticals.
So basically with supplements, with physical supplements, 95% of the time, your body doesn't absorb all of it. But with Infoceuticals, they're just encoding it with language and there's no side effects.
So I have seen, what are they called? Allopathic. No, not allopathic. That's Western medicine. I'm trying to think of what it is, but basically they've got this frequency-based technology where they can like scan your body and it pulls up a whole reading of your body, and then they will administer frequencies that like it shows where you're at, and then it will administer frequencies to bring you back into resonance.
Wow.
And then that same machine, you can take sugar pills and put them in the device, so it scans you and it shows you what your body needs. The same frequency that they put on you in that session, they program the sugar pills. Now the sugar pill holds that frequency to where you can take that as the medicine.
I want to try that.
So you leave with that, and I forget the name of the device. I can send you info later.
I definitely want to try that.
But I've seen where they're using, like I said, the information of the frequency to affect.
That's the future of medicine right there.
It is.
I'm really excited to see that.
The future of medicine is energy based.
Yeah.
So
it's not physical.
No.
Yeah, it's going to be energy based.
Well, you wouldn't believe that a lot of the stuff that people like injuries or things that aren't healing, it's because we're storing trauma. If you look up something called the Metaphysical Anatomy book, it shows like all these different issues. If you look up what's going on and then you read like the metaphysical description of why you have that thing, people that have like knee pain and they're in their, specifically in the right knee, that's your masculine side. People that have right knee pain, it's typically because they're not moving forward in their life. They don't have a direction, or there's something happening with that. And so if the book's like this thick, but it goes through all the organs, all different parts of the body, and it explains what these things are. And me, for someone that knows the stuff, like, you know, when I've got something going on, I'm like, wow, that is something that I'm struggling with right now. And then guess what? You work on that aspect of yourself, and then like, wow, knee doesn't hurt anymore, or wow, you know. And so it's interesting that a lot of these things have to do with, you know, emotional responses. It's interesting. The idea of disease, right? Disease starts off as dis-ease. It's like you endure an emotional trauma, right? It can be heartbreak or something, or some sort of anger. And then instead of processing that emotion, what we do is we escape it, right? People use drugs, alcohol, food, sex, all these different things to escape how they feel, because it doesn't feel good to feel that emotion. But what's crazy is that when you're trying to escape that emotion through these different things, especially if it's some type of like food or drug or alcohol, you don't realize that like unconsciously, the emotion that you're trying to escape, you are assigning, because your emotions actually hold and process emotions. And so when you are escaping an emotion with a chemical, you're unconsciously assigning that toxin to that organ system. So you're actually polluting, and people that are angry, you know, they start drinking and then the liver corrodes because they're literally assigning that to that organ.
Yep.
And so that dis-ease eventually can manifest into disease.
Yeah, that happened to me yesterday. So before I got the stem cells, I had to get a fascia massage. Have you got one of those?
Yeah, I love fascia massages. It feels like they're ripping you apart.
Yeah. So it ended up being an hour and a half because I had so much anger on the right side of my body, and I had a lot of mother wound on my left arm. Man, she had to get 3 ladies to work on my body at the same time. It was that intense, but I felt amazing after.
Yeah, the myofascial release is one of the most important things you can do. And it's interesting because the trauma can also be stored in the fascia, and so, you know, these different things are all part of your healing journey. And it's very, like, when it comes to healing and this ascension, it's really good to understand things holistically and learning how all the different things go together. There's not just one thing that works. Like, there's certain things that work for different people, but learning what is the right medicine for the thing you're working on is one of the most important things.
Absolutely. Jerome, it's been awesome. We'll link your stuff below. I hope to see you again, man.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, check them out, guys, if you're interested in this stuff, and I'll see you next time.
I hope you guys are enjoying the show. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. It helps the show a lot with the algorithm. Thank you.